My next guest is a Republican congressman from Texas and author of the new book, Fortitude, American Resilience in the Era of Outrage. Please welcome Dan Crenshaw. Congressman, thank you for doing this. I must tell you, I first became aware of you, as I think many Americans did, when Pete Davidson of Saturday Night Live made that joke about you. And I have to tell you, I am such a fan of what you said, because you never hear that in American life. You said, look, it was wrong, but let's just forgive each other. I know you've done much better things for this country. 5 tours you did overseas. But thank you for your service in calling out victim culture.
Well, no, I appreciate that, Bill. And first of all, thanks for having me. I know we had planned to do this in the studio in Los Angeles. Unfortunately, life took a different turn. You know, the phrase I used after Pete Davidson said that, which I think you would love this phrase, is try hard not to be offended, or try hard not to offend, but try even harder not to offend or be offended. Geez, I'm really screwing this up. Try hard not to offend, try even harder not to be offended. And I think that'd be a way to live for all of us.
No, and we both share this disdain for victim culture and for lots of stuff, trophy syndrome. I hope I have some credibility with you because, you know, I did a show called Politically Incorrect, which started in 1993 when I think you were about 10. And I was onto this shit a long time ago, and it hasn't gotten any better.
I think you do have some credibility for sure in conservative circles. I don't know how often you test or do focus groups with amongst conservatives, but we generally think of you as a real liberal, and you know, and that means something. And there's a difference between liberalism and leftism, and we can disagree wholeheartedly on the best way to govern our country or the best way to perceive a problem and the framework with which to approach problem solving. But open-mindedness and the ability to debate should be a key tenet of liberalism, and at least in the classical sense. And so, no, we do appreciate it.
Okay, so let's debate a little bit. I mean, you say in your book, I'm going to quote you call out automatic assignment of blame outward. That's what we were just talking about. Help me understand how someone who calls out the outward assignment of blame can be such a supporter of a president who does nothing but pass the buck, lie, finger point, shirk responsibility. Tell me how you can support someone with your background, someone like that.
Yeah, it didn't take long for Trump to come up. You know, I would say I support the country, right? And the president's success is certainly tied to the success of the country. I support his policy agenda. When I disagree with his policy agenda, I openly disagree with it. This isn't, you know, Republicans always get asked this question, and there's this demand that we always have to answer. What do you feel about him? Well, don't you want to comment on his latest tweet and his latest the way he lashed out? And no, I don't. I can't defend everything. He doesn't have the same style as I do. I don't consider him my spiritual guide by any means, but you know, let me tell you a quick story. When I was blown up, sitting in my hospital bed, President Obama was doing the rounds at Walter Reed, just like President Trump does now, and just like President Bush did before him. It's a really neat thing. It's a really interesting connection that the president gets with these wounded active duty soldiers that is never publicized. And even though I may have disagreed with so many levels with President Obama, I made sure to get up, and I was excited. I was genuinely happy, and to shake that man's hand and have him sign the American flag on my wall. And you know, even though we disagree on political things, and I think I would like us to get to that point with this president as well.
Okay, but you do what a lot of Republicans do. You talk about his tweets and his style. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the person who is the leader of the country at a time of crisis. And we have to go through what he actually has done. This is important stuff. It's about life and death, and it's about our economy and everything that's really important. It's not tweets and it's not style. Let's just go through the timeline, okay? Because he was warned. This did not have to happen. Alex Azar, his Health and Human Services guy, January 18th, he warned him about this. And again on January 30th, Trump said he was being an alarmist. Peter Navarro, somebody else who talks to Trump a lot, told him directly January 29th, you got to get ahead of this. February 10th.
2 days later, he implemented a restrictive travel ban from China, which he was widely criticized for. That same day, on January 31st, Nancy Pelosi proposed the No Ban Act, which would be congressional limitation on what President Trump's actually able to do with that travel restriction.
Okay, but I mean, he lies about that. First of all, he didn't.
How does he lie about it? What do you mean?
He said he stopped people coming in from China. He did not. He said he was ahead of it. 43 countries did it before we did. There are still people coming in from China. He only stopped foreign nationals.
Yeah, okay, let me address that, because I know that's what people are saying right now. But the reality is, it was about 40,000 people came in after that. These were U.S. citizens and green card holders and passport holders being repatriated. U.S. citizens. So you have to make the argument then that we shouldn't allow them in. I mean, it sounds to me like you're fully agreeing with President Trump on this when everybody else disagreed with him. And if you're saying that you wish that travel restriction had been more extreme, okay, fine. I mean, you apparently had the foresight back then, but when nobody else did. But the fact is, if Joe Biden was in charge at that moment, he's already said he wouldn't have done it. He criticized it at the time. Nancy Pelosi actually proposed legislation to stop it.
Okay, so, but people are still coming in from China. It wasn't just foreign nationals, but let's get off that. Let me just go back to the timeline for a minute. February 10th, after these warnings, he says it's going to go away in April with the heat because he had a hunch. February 25th, he goes to India. This is 4 days after the White House Coronavirus Task Force said we're going to have to lock down the country, and Dr. Nancy Messonnier, who's in charge of the Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases. Wait a second, let me just finish. She announced this on the 26th, on the 25th, that we were going to have to lock down the country. He said the next day, 15 people have it, and it's soon going to be close to zero. March 6th, he said anyone who wants a test can get it, which is still completely,
let me stick to February.
Completely wrong.
As you go forward, because you mentioned February 25th. The day before, February 24th, that's when the administration requested $2.5 billion from Congress to fulfill, CDC, NIH, and FDA funding to combat the virus and the potential spread of it. What happened right then? I'll tell you, because I was in Congress and I know what happened. Did we vote on a supplemental funding bill? No. Did we wait days to vote? No, still didn't vote on it. You know what we voted on later that week? Nancy Pelosi, the only thing she would put on the floor to vote on was a bill to ban flavored tobacco. That's what actually happened. It was only a week later that we actually voted on the supplemental funding that the administration requested. Your criticism appears to be based in one thing, that Trump was overly optimistic. That's his style. Again, you can criticize it. That's fine. But it's not connected to the actions that were actually taken. Because if I back up even further, February 14th, CDC announces ongoing work with 5 laboratories to perform community-based influenza surveillance and study the spread of the virus. We're in a fact-finding mode in February. People forget this. People keep calling February this lost month. But it's really not. That's an easy and cheap accusation, because there's no big, bold moves taken like there was in January or like there was in March. But the reality is our government was working to create that test. Now, did they work as fast as we would have liked? And of course not. And there's a lot of reasons for that, which I'm happy to go into. By March 3rd, there was only 102 cases in the United States. And yet I'm hearing criticism that we should have been locked down weeks earlier. But would you think the American people would have accepted that with only 100 cases in the United States? Italy didn't lock down until March 10th. Spain, not until March 14th. UK, not until later in March. Places like Sweden's never locked down. And so I provide all of that context as we try to basically accuse this man of he's being accused of having blood on his hands, and context is so important here.
Well, it is. And also, it's not just about being optimistic, it's about being right. The world was aware of this. And since when does America take its lead from Italy and Spain?
Well, because those were where the outbreaks were happening.
I understand.
Right? Well, I'm pointing it out again for context. But if we're going to criticize somebody's actions, we have to do it in the context of the facts they knew at the time. And so I'm just trying to be fair here. That I don't really care about defending him or his actions. I just care about letting people know the truth. And when people make these accusations, I have to ask them a question. Is the goal to make Trump look bad, or is the goal to get to the truth? Because there's two different sets of answers for that.
Okay, but sometimes they converge. Sometimes the truth is that somebody who says, I
If
have
they
a
converge, they
hunch.
converge.
I have a hunch this is going to go away. Is that someone you would want to have served with? I mean, my God, I don't
Yeah. Well,
understand again why
actually,
someone with your resume, you were in Fallujah for God's sakes. Would you want
so
someone,
yeah.
a commander, to say that to you, to blame everybody else if something goes wrong, and then to
I
say,
don't think
you know, I
it's
have a hunch the
yeah.
enemy's not going to be in there. Let's attack.
Sure, no, I understand that. So here's how I would describe my answer to that. When bullets are flying past my head, I don't need to raise my voice. And I write about this in my book too. Calm breeds calm, panic breeds panic. Um, you know, being an optimistic, positive, and exuding positivity and calmness in crisis is exactly how we ask our SEALs to lead. And now I'm not sure I see a lot of evidence for blaming others, maybe blaming China, although there's a lot of evidence for that. So maybe that's a good place to lay blame. But I
I did
haven't
it
seen
last
Trump
week.
blaming, Democrats here, or he's exposing hypocrisy, and maybe we're confusing that with blame. But no, I mean, again, calm breeds calm, and that's how we would lead in the SEAL teams.
Okay. So in Texas, there was a 6-hour line to vote a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah,
It does look like the Republican Party doesn't want people to vote, especially mail in vote. And there's going to be people now who are afraid to go to the polls because of this disease.
yeah.
Um,
So let me
where,
explain.
where
I'll
do you
explain
stand on that?
the lines. I'm sorry. Go
Do
ahead.
you think Republicans are trying to stop people from voting? Do you really want it? Wouldn't you rather lose an election than live in a country where we're not really getting our franchise?
So the lines in Houston here, and those big 6-hour waits you saw, Republicans aren't in charge of those elections. The Democrats are in charge of our county elections here. They run that. The county clerk is a Democrat. Recently won. That's why they're in charge. They've taken full responsibility for those lines, because basically what happened is a lot of machines went down, and that's what caused the lines. There isn't. So first of all, it's not Republicans, it's Democrats in these urban areas that actually run the election system. And second, there was no ill intent. Even I don't think ill intent from Democrats either. There was mistakes made. In Texas, you have 2 weeks to early vote from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. for 2 weeks straight. You can go anywhere in the county and cast your vote. You don't have to vote on election day. If you're elderly or sick and disabled, you can vote in by mail. No, it's not the case that we don't want people to vote. And of course, that's always the accusation, but it's not really based in evidence. Mail-in ballots do have that. There's a break of custody of a vote there. There's if it's not fraudulent, there's at least the possibility for mistakes to be made, and we see that often. I read an op-ed recently from a former Texas member who was going door to door based on voter registration, just knocking on doors, and would find a group of non-U.S. citizens, but they're registered there, or a empty lot, but it's registered. So if you start mailing all of these types of places ballots, well then it's not ill intent, but there's the possibility for a lot of bad things to happen. And so the question we have to ask ourselves, do we really want to, especially from a national level, try to revamp our entire election system, and with the potential for all these problems? And for what exactly? And so I don't know if your question is related to COVID-19
Well,
or just elections in general, but
well, everything's related to that these days. And there, of course, is a lot to be said about your answer, which is a terrific answer from a press spokesman for that cause. But I don't have time to do it now. I hope you can come to our show as we planned sometime, and we will take up this issue of whether Republicans really are protecting your franchise or not. But I appreciate you doing this. I appreciate everything you've done for this country. And I hope I see you in person soon. Thank you.
hey, thanks, Bill. Great to be with you.